Have you ever noticed how some people move through the world quietly? Not necessarily sad, not broken, just distant, almost as if they're living one step to the side of everyone else. People with no friends often give off this aura, not because they dislike people, but because something in their life taught them to exist without leaning on anyone. It rarely starts in adulthood. Loneliness grows slowly, almost invisibly, like a shadow that lengthens a little each year. For some, it begins in childhood, where the lessons about connection are first written. Imagine a kid who learned early on that their feelings were inconvenient, that their needs were too much, or that speaking up brought criticism instead of comfort. Over time, the safest strategy becomes silence. And if silence is the safest place to exist, it becomes a habit so deeply ingrained that by adulthood, connection feels foreign. Some children weren't ignored, they were forgotten. The middle child who blended in to avoid conflict. The quiet kid who never caused trouble and was praised for being so independent. Even though independence wasn't a gift, it was a lack of support. Some were raised in chaotic homes where emotional closeness was unpredictable. They never knew which version of a parent they were coming home to, so they learned not to trust intimacy. And that kind of upbringing doesn't disappear. It lingers. It shapes attachment, comfort, and the ability to let people in. People with no friends don't walk into adulthood thinking, I don't need anyone. Most walk in thinking, I don't want to depend on anyone who might leave. There is a big difference. One is confidence. The other is conditioning. And conditioning runs deep. Imagine spending years watching friendships fall apart around you. Friends who drifted, betrayed, outgrew you, or simply stopped trying. Eventually, you start to believe that maybe you're the common denominator. Even when it's not true, the mind is powerful at inventing explanations that protect the heart. Withdrawal becomes a coping mechanism long before it becomes a lifestyle. This is why people with no friends often show signs of hyper-awareness. They notice every shift in someone's energy, every delay in a text, every change in tone, not because they're paranoid, but because their nervous system has been trained to anticipate disappointment. It's almost biological. When you've been hurt enough times, your brain becomes an early warning system. Every relationship feels like walking on a floor you're not sure is stable. And then there's the fear of being misunderstood. People who spend a lot of time alone develop incredibly rich inner worlds. They think deeply. They feel deeply. They analyze everything. And when you're wired like that, shallow social interactions feel exhausting. Small talk feels hollow. Group dynamics feel chaotic. The depth inside you rarely matches the energy outside you. That mismatch makes forming friendships harder, not because you don't want them, but because most people never reach the level where you actually feel connected. Some people end up friendless because the world they live in isn't built for their type of mind. They don't thrive in crowds, they don't enjoy loud social settings, and they don't easily open up. They need slow, safe, honest connection. They need someone who sees beyond the surface. And those people aren't easy to find. So rather than forcing connections that feel draining, they choose solitude that feels familiar. But solitude isn't always peaceful. There are nights when it feels heavy, like you're trapped inside your own world with no exit. People with no friends often deal with unspoken anxiety, the kind that comes from replaying every social interaction and wondering whether they said something wrong. They're often harder on themselves than anyone else has ever been on them. And this self-criticism slowly convinces them that staying alone is easier than risking embarrassment, awkwardness, or judgment. But here's something almost no one realizes. People with no friends are often some of the most empathetic, observant, and emotionally intelligent individuals you'll meet. Why? Because loneliness forces introspection. It teaches you to understand emotions, your own and others. It sharpens your ability to read a room, sense tension, detect authenticity. People who spend time alone learn to analyze human behavior with incredible precision because observing becomes their main form of interaction. And ironically, this emotional depth, this intelligence, makes shallow friendships unbearable. They can't pretend. They can't fake being okay with surface level connection. They crave something real. And until something real appears, they'd rather stay alone. People with no friends also have a complicated relationship with self-worth. They often act self-sufficient on the outside, confident, capable, independent. But inside, there's a soft voice asking, why hasn't anyone chosen me? That question can quietly shape everything: how they act, how they trust, how they read social cues. When friendships don't come easily, some start believing that maybe they're fundamentally difficult to love. Even though it's not true, loneliness distorts perception. What many people misunderstand is that emotional isolation doesn't always look lonely. Sometimes it looks disciplined, structured, self-contained. People who have spent years on their own become masters of routine. Their lives become predictable because uncertainty in relationships once felt painful. They build worlds that depend on no one, not because they don't desire connection, but because unpredictability hurts more than solitude. There's also a very real biological side to all of this. Social rejection activates the same pain pathways in the brain as physical injury. When someone experiences enough emotional hurt, their brain starts shielding them from more. It pulls them inward. It numbs the desire for connection. It convinces them they're better off alone, even when they aren't. Then there's the societal layer. We live in a world that celebrates extroversion: loud friendships, busy social lives, group photos, constant interaction. When someone doesn't live like that, they're labeled strange, antisocial, or not trying hard enough. But the truth is simple. Not everyone fits the mold. Some people don't thrive in groups. Some don't feel safe in crowds. Some don't know how to take up space. And forcing them into those environments only pushes them further away. But something beautiful happens to people who spend long stretches without friends. They develop a deeper sense of self. They learn what they value, what they can tolerate, what actually matters to them. They're not easily influenced. They're not easily swayed. They become emotionally self-sufficient in a way that people who always had social support may never fully understand. Still, there's a cost. Humans need connection the way plants need sunlight. Too much solitude can slowly dull your sense of aliveness. Some people wake up one day and realize they haven't laughed with someone in months. They haven't shared a story in years. They haven't felt truly seen, maybe ever. And that realization hurts in a very specific way. The kind of ache that sits behind your ribs. Not loud enough to break you, but deep enough to remind you that something's missing. Yet even then, people with no friends rarely rush toward connection. They take their time. They observe first. They open up quietly. They trust slowly. They test the waters. They need relationships that feel predictable, safe, and emotionally spacious. They need people who understand silence, who don't demand performance, who aren't threatened by depth. And here's the surprising part. When someone like this finally finds their people, they become incredible friends. Loyal beyond reason, attentive, present, emotionally intelligent. They don't take connection for granted because they know what it feels like to live without it. They love deeply because they're not used to giving their heart halfway. When they choose someone, it's deliberate, thoughtful. The world often misunderstands those who spend life alone. But loneliness isn't evidence of failure. It's evidence of sensitivity, evidence of high standards, evidence of a life lived quietly but thoughtfully. And maybe that's why people with no friends are some of the most complex, beautiful souls you'll ever encounter. If you are one of them, there is nothing wrong with you. You're not behind. You're not broken. You're not unlovable. You're someone who needs connection that feels safe enough to trust, deep enough to stay, and gentle enough to breathe in. Friendships will come, not because you force them, but because eventually you will cross paths with someone who recognizes your depth instead of fearing it. Someone who sees your quietness not as emptiness, but as richness. Someone who doesn't demand you to speak louder, but listens more softly. Life has a strange way of bringing the right people at the right time. Until then, solitude isn't your enemy. It's your preparation.